All right, let's give this a go. So thank you so much to Luna PR for setting up this event. It's actually really incredible to see the depth of talent they've managed to attract here. And some of the conversations I've had on the margins have been really inspiring. The thing I wanted to talk to folks about today is going to be a little bit controversial. I'm going to perhaps suggest that the thesis at the heart of the valuation for most of the tokens that we're talking about at this summit probably doesn't make sense. And that isn't to say these chains don't have value, but really that the token valuation methodology and the way in which we accrue value on chain needs to change and needs to be thought of differently. And I'm going to talk a little bit about Somnia, of course, I have to, but probably more in the context of an example of how we're trying to do things pretty differently, not just technologically, but also in the way in which value should accrue to a token. But a little bit of background perhaps on myself first to justify all of that I'm going to say before I get controversial. I'm the CEO and founder of Improbable, which you may know more in the metaverse and technology space, but we're also have been in defense, having supported the war in Ukraine and sold businesses there in gaming, and also have built and created multiple companies in the AI space as well. And really the reason we entered into building a chain and why we launched Somnia relates a lot to our long-term vision of building the kind of infrastructure we wanted to use for the companies we wanted to build on top of. And I think the first maybe controversial or challenging point I would say is we've built 1 million transaction a second blockchain. And if you look at the tokenomics of transaction fees alone, 1 million TPS blockchain can never justify at a protocol level, a protocol revenue basis, vast valuations. In fact, I'd go as far as to say if you look at most chains, looking at Ton, for example, which has 1 billion users, but only $30 million of protocol revenue. Or Solana, which has billions in protocol revenue, but most of which is priority fees associated with meme coins and other assets. We're starting to kind of see a problem here, right? And the problem is that a chain can get widely used by lots of people, can even support really big applications. Look at Ethereum as an example. But value just doesn't accrue back to the token. The story we've been told that transaction fees will lead to token value really doesn't make sense at scale. The analogy I would give you is, imagine if you'd been asked to invest in Google at an early stage. But rather than getting shares in Google, or a share of Google's ad revenue, you were offered a cut just of the revenue that the canteen makes at Google headquarters, right? You would expect this number to go up as Google became more successful and hired more people, but it would have nothing to do with the overall economic value being created on that ecosystem. And this is the single biggest danger to every person building a DAT, to every person swallowing the token narratives that were being sold. Even if these chains win, the value does not accrue to the token. And I think this issue is probably best understood by looking at Ethereum, where we're repeatedly told, hey, this is the biggest DeFi ecosystem. There is so much TVL, there's so much liquidity. Yes, but it's completely fragmented into different chains whose economics as L2s, once again, does not lead back to token value for the L1, not in any significant scale. So this really paints like a deep problem, and the problem only gets worse as chains get faster, because when chains are slow and transactions are expensive, you can just about proxy transaction value with chain value. But the moment we start getting into gigachains, applications like Somnia, but not just us, people like Monad, who are slower but still very fast, Mega ETH, who are adding more transactions than have been seen before, really valuing this has got to change. So my argument is there is a much better way to do things. And that better way is for DAT organizations, token treasuries, and ultimately the companies that build these chains like us to build good businesses and to correctly align the value of the equity position of those businesses with the fundamental value of a token. And so what we're doing with Somnia is we're not really stopping at the level of a chain. Yes, we have the best underlying tech on the EVM, but what we're beginning to do is to build protocol-like businesses on top of the chain, all of which accrue value right back to the token. So one really good example of this is Ruliad. And Ruliad is a totally new infrastructure for LLM-based decentralized prediction markets. So what that means is you or I can make a bet on really any topic and point to a news website or a data stream and have the liquidity aggregate and have that bet resolve automatically without human intervention. Pretty cool, nice piece of technology, but not by itself a business, more of a piece of infrastructure on top of Somnia. Now what we're doing is we're taking that infrastructure and we're starting to build businesses that wouldn't be possible anywhere else, and then aligning the value of those businesses to the underlying token. So I'll just give you one example of a deal we did just this weekend. So this business is called Tail Risk, working title, and the goal of the team is to take the Rule infrastructure and allow for hedging against some of the most important questions happening in the world today. So let me ask a question to this group just to kind of understand people's context of this. Who here owns any tech stock? Do you own tech stock? Hands up, you must own some. No? Who's kind of long on China not invading Taiwan in the next 2 years? All right, cool. Who would take 5-to-1 odds that happens? You give me $1, I give you $5 back. Oh wow, okay, you're up for this. Who else? You two, 7-to-1, 10-to-1, 100-to-1? Starts to get more and more attractive. So one of the problems with the prediction markets, why they're not really being used by institutions to hedge, is that the outcome you can get on these questions with derivatives is much, much more than what you can get on something like Polymarket. So what this company is doing is actually building an exchange, the first of its kind, where you can use derivatives to back these questions and create a much larger asymmetric upside for participants. And what we're doing as investors is we're not just giving them capital, we're locking up our SOMI in a protocol that will let other people earn revenue yield from the success of that business, regardless of what the underlying transactions do. Another business that we're really excited about is in the space of AI and data training. So one of the challenges we're trying to solve with Somnia is how do you reward the thousands of human experts that are needed in order to help train large language models? So we've announced an investment very soon in a business that will bring together the largest network of such experts on the planet, 200,000 PhD students and graduates, all of whom are working together to create a massively profitable pathway to train data, train AI, but recording all the data and all of the validation on-chain on Somnia. And once again, that business's value won't necessarily tie to transactions. So once again, we're creating a mechanism to let SOMI token holders connect with the value of the business. So my point overall is this: we have to change how we value chains. We have to change how we think about incentivizing the owners of tokens with the upside of these ecosystems. And if it were me today starting a DAT or looking to acquire token for the express purpose of telling a NAV positive story, the question I have to answer is, what businesses am I backing? What revenue am I backing? The greater fool idea of constantly hot potatoing tokens, we all know cannot be sustainable. And I also think that, not just us, but looking at some of the newer chains, this is a really big opportunity to tell value stories for new infrastructure, because a lot of the older chains have already locked in how they create value. It's very difficult to change that on day one. And I think as we see big companies enter the space who are really looking to improve their stock value through their chains, good example of this is Tempo with Stripe, I think we're going to see much more innovative approaches to doing this. So the final result of all of this, I would say, is I think a sane strategy is to hedge against the collapse, not of chain usage, but of chain business models, by building a portfolio contradicting some of the folks from earlier today that maybe is a bit more diversified, not just in terms of like EVM, non-EVM, but really in terms of business model. That has to be the heart of how we think about creating value. Or else, the day may very well come when you find yourself in the position of owning a ton of an asset of a very, very well-used blockchain that's still worthless. Thank you.